that intuitively there is a fear of the spiritual, the cultural, and the political power that these rituals can have. That in us coming together and performing libation together, they know that there is power in that act. And so that if they can make us feel ashamed of that and that there's something wrong with it, then they are weakening us and cutting us off from a source of power. Libation is a sacred act which symbolically expresses meaning on several levels at once. It reflects a very sophisticated philosophical understanding of spiritual reality. It enables African people to relate to a multi-dimensional, rich, and complex universe. And I want to explain libation on 3 levels. On one level, this act of libation, the pouring of the liquid or setting aside of the food, makes a statement, and it says that the community is whole. The community is together, and therefore is strong, and that life is meaningful. If that's the case, then we need the presence of not only the physical community, but we need the presence of the spiritual community as well, if we are to be whole. And this is essential at mealtime. It is essential at mealtime so that we can have a feeling of spiritual security, that the family is together, that the family is whole. And there used to be a time when we would feel that way about our family dinners and our meals.
That's right.
And our parents would want to make sure that everybody was there, because there was something special about that. We've lost a lot of that now. So we eat anywhere, in any way, with anyone.
That's right.
But the taking of a meal together had spiritual significance in the African mind, and still does. So that you didn't want to be able to say that somebody's missing. What you say is that everybody is there. The elders are served first, so the ancestors must be served first, because the ancestors are the elders of the family. And their presence is symbolized through libation. Okay, and there are many ways in which we continue that practice and don't even realize it. And when the brothers on the corner, well, before they drink, they will open a bottle, they will pour off something, and they'll say, that's for the brother who's not here. Am I correct? Okay, and we can talk more about that later. That is practicing ancestor communion, but not on a conscious level. They don't know where it comes from, but that's okay too. Remember that in the African worldview, spirit and matter are joined. We can express a spiritual concept through doing something which is physical. And that's what we're doing when we do that. We can express, feel, state, and affirm the spiritual presence of departed members of the family by sharing meal with them. Symbolically, we are keeping them alive. The second meaning of libation. The ancestors act on our behalf. They have increased spiritual power. They are closer to the source. So they can protect us, they can guide us, they can help us, they can bless us with fertility, with children, with prosperity, all because they are closer to the source of power, to the source of life. They are a vehicle through which we receive energy from the creative source. They energize us, but only if we honor them. And that is what libation is doing. By honoring them, we strengthen them. We are asking for strength, and so we give strength. What is the principle here? Reciprocity. The circle again. The ancestors also need us, because without the physically living, and this is an important point, without us, the physically living, their spirit cannot manifest. Their spirit cannot be manifested. There is an interdependent relationship between us and the ancestors. We need each other. When we have harvest, we give the first fruits to the ancestors. That still happens in the Caribbean. Okay? We thank them. The ancestors represent a spiritual part of ourselves with which we must remain in contact in order to be whole. The ancestors are us. To honor them is to honor the divine within us. That is our divine specificity. By that I mean our divine uniqueness, our divine genealogy, our divine history. All of these things, that is our particular history, our line, our bloodline, our nation, is responsible for the talents, gifts, and achievements of our people. That's what Ancestor Communion tells us. Libation is an act of thanksgiving. It is an act of honor and an act of respect. Now there's another level. I told you it was multidimensional, on which libation has significance. Libation is an act of communion. The community becomes one through spiritual joining. As we've said before, that's what communion means. Okay? The family becomes one by spiritual joining. The nation, our nation, becomes one by spiritual joining. We join with our ancestors, and in so doing, they become immortal through these acts of libation. They become immortal. And what happens to us? We become immortal. Without this, there is no immortality. There is no life without ancestral communion. There is no renewal. The circle is broken. Libation, like all ritual and other ceremonies of ancestor communion, symbolizes the link between the physically dead and the physically living. Symbolically, it states the connection between spirit and matter, between the sacred and the profane, or the sacred and the ordinary. This is very important because philosophically, we achieve immortality by transcending finite existence, physical existence, mortal existence. That's what it means to be immortal. We achieve immortality by transcending the boundaries which separate past, present, and future. Indeed, through the creation and awareness of sacred time, we do away with these lineal conceptions of past, present, and future. We are able to exist in sacred time, the eternal, timeless dimension, in which we have recreated life. That's what we can do as Africans. We recreate life through the mechanism and concept of rebirth. Rebirth is a powerful concept. European materialism cannot achieve this. Okay? Perhaps rebirth is the most important of African spiritual conceptions. In the eternal dimension, all being is joined and can therefore be energized by the universal life force or creative energy. Can you believe that all of this is being said, symbolized, stated symbolically when we pour libations, when we set aside a portion of food, which people want to tell us is some kind of strange act of heathen. The writer that I referred to before, he said that Africans had no future. Well, he said that African conceptions are limited, and that what we needed was European conceptions to break out of that limitation. Actually, the seeds of our future are planted within us by a sacred past. And what happens is that instead of a line being drawn, we get a circle with spiral dimensions. And so we carry within us all time. He didn't understand this because in adopting a non-African religion, he was forced to use a non-African worldview. And he attempted to use that worldview to explain African concepts, which you can't do. Now let's return to this idea of memory. And remember, we were talking about personal immortality, and I asked you a question about it. And let's say, what happens to us? What happens to our spirit after 5, 6, or 7 generations, maybe a century or maybe 2 centuries we're talking about? That's a hard time to remember anything, right? A long time. So is this the end? I don't know if anybody had an answer for me, but I asked it a time before. Do you think that that's the end? Well, you know I'm going to say no, right? But then the question is why and how, how do we get out of that? Okay. There is a good term which Mbidi uses that he calls collective immortality. He says after this period we move into collective immortality. Let's see very quickly, what does that mean? We are no longer remembered by our specific name. There is nobody around anymore who remembers what we look like or what we did particularly in our lives, okay? That's long been gone. So what happens? Our existence changes. It takes a new form. It takes a new dimension. We no longer exist on a personal level. Our existence is no longer single. It is no longer unique. It is no longer limited to what we were as physical beings. It becomes something else. Our identity changes. It merges with the collective identity of the group, with the collective identity of the nation, the collective identity of the community and the culture. We become a part of a spiritual collectivity linked to cultural and racial origins, and which continues in the traditions and existence of a group's collective memory. It continues in the cultural origins of that group. I'm going to refer to something that James Small said. He said, I feel the pain of my ancestors during the Middle Passage. That's what he's talking about now. He doesn't know a particular person who was in that Middle Passage necessarily, you understand? But being a part of that spiritually, he feels that pain. So that's his memory. That's his collective spiritual memory that allows him to do that. We share in the courage of Harriet Tubman because she was our ancestor. That's what this concept means. It's a powerful concept. It has serious implications also. That is, it puts a heavy weight on us. We got to remember that. We have a heavy responsibility. Our collective ancestors live only as long as we have a national, racial consciousness. You hear what I'm saying? Only as long as we identify with them do they live. So we have the power of either killing them or making them live by what we do. Only as long as we remember who we are and where we came from, who we're connected to, will they live. Do you hear what I'm saying? And that is why such pains have been taken by Europeans and the proselytizers of non-African religions to make us forget who we are or make us ashamed of being who we are or make us associate our ancestors with evil. And that's what we've done. That's what we've done. There are many statements which we make that really are saying that. They're saying our ancestors were involved in some evil things and that we are involved in evil things when we do as they did. To forget in this concept is to terminate. To praise someone else's ancestors is to strengthen their ancestors and to strengthen them. Now their ancestors cannot strengthen us. That's what this concept says. And what we do when we do that is that we cut ourselves off from a source of strength. Our only source of strength. Because it's our link to the creative source, to creative energy, to the source of life. We cut ourselves off from life-giving forces when we forget our ancestors. And thereby we deny ourselves immortality. There is no cultural existence, no spiritual strength, no immortality for us except as a whole, as one, and as a community. Only by recognizing ourselves as a community, as a nation of people, as one, can we gain these things. We cannot gain them as, in quote, individuals. That's what this concept says. Individuals divorced from cultural, historical origins. We can only attain them as a community, as a collective, as a nation, and as a people. And that is what the concept of ancestor communion means. That's what it states. I'm going to say some very hard things. Okay? Now, Jesus is reputed to have said, "No one comes to my Father but through me." The African says, "No one gains eternal life but through her own ancestors."